questions in. We're getting a ton, which is awesome, but keep submitting them. Let's get them in. Let's drain their brains. Let's go. JB, take us home.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Love listening to Lincoln and obviously Jessica. And, you know, when I was talking to Vanessa, who helped set this up, about, you know, what my role might be, you know, I really wanted to try to bring something that I felt was a little bit different. And what I mean by that is there's a ton of great information, you know, on the web or wherever you want to find it. There's so much great information on data, on blast, and there's incredible drills, and you can pretty much find a drill, you know, for every metric that you're trying to work with in blast, which is fantastic. I use a lot of those drills myself. I've seen Lincoln's drills. Those are phenomenal. But I thought what I might try to do today is show a process that I use with hitters, and I work with you know, hitters from 8U all the way up to, you know, 18. And I wanted to do something that I felt like literally when this is over, they could go in the garage and make some changes that might help them. And I wanted it all to be centered around the playing score. And as you can see in this quote here, you know, for me, a hitter becoming their own best hitting coach is just is the end goal, right? We want hitters to really understand their swings at levels to where they can make their own adjustments. So, so we can go to the next slide. So a couple of big picture things for me that I want to kind of just, you know, talk about before we dig into the actual blast. And really, you know, as I'm sure Lincoln works with all different kinds of hitters as well as myself, you know, there are what I call literal hitters, meaning that I'll have a kid that comes into lesson and I'll show them a drill, and maybe the drill is some kind of constraint where the barrel's on the shoulder. And if I don't do a great job conveying that that's a drill and not necessarily their swing, then they show up in the tournament and their mom sends me a video of them swinging off their shoulder. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. That was a drill. That wasn't your swing. So that's on me for not getting that information to them that, you know, drills are drills, and you have to understand that we're going to do drills to build patterns, but your swing is your swing. And eventually, if you're doing good drills, they will influence your swing, but you don't want to be too literal. The next example about that is a lot of times when kids will come to me after a tournament, I'm like, how did you hit and all that? Well, I was really struggling this weekend, you know, my dad said I just, you know, I kept dropping my shoulder, or I kept lunging on my front side, or whatever the, you know, the whatever it would be. And I would be like, well, wait a minute, let's back up. Is that truly the case? Or are you looking at it purely from a mechanical point of view? For an example, what was the decision on the pitch? Was it actually a good decision? Should you have swung at that pitch in which you're talking about? And if the answer is no, well, then the mechanics no longer matter, because if your decision making isn't solid, then you're going to disrupt your timing, which is going to disrupt your adjustments, which is going to disrupt your mechanics. And that's why you can have that beautiful swing off of a tee, but if your timing gets disrupted in a game, the swing may not be as great as it is in a controlled environment. And that's one of the things I think you see in the MLB, much different from what we see at the youth level. Is MLB, they're able to maintain those swing patterns through a lot more situations than a young player might be able to. So that comes to my big picture stuff on trying to explain to, you know, listeners out there and hitters that, you know, reaching your potential as a hitter is a lot more than just the mechanical elements. And you definitely want to make sure, if you're not already, that you're taking that into account, right? So just some keys that I have here listed is, you know, you want to make sure that you're making good decisions. Obviously, having great timing is going to translate into being a better hitter than somebody who really struggles with timing. You want to be adjustable. You want to be able to have adjustability that ties into mechanics, but it also ties into the other things. Confidence, you know, that we won't go into that because I know that, you know, the time is limited, and I could literally spend an hour just on these 6 subjects. And then of course there's the mechanics, which we're speaking a lot about today. And these aren't necessarily in any order. I'm not saying that number 1 is more important than number 6. These are just things that I like to focus on. And then the self-coaching, which I already talked about. So I think it's important to take all of that when you're a hitter trying to maximize your potential, right? That you're considering how well are you doing in these different areas and not just so much physically what you may or may not be doing correctly. So that brings me to the role of technology. And anybody that knows me well is I'm just like you guys. I'm a complete nerd when it comes to tech. Anytime something comes out, you know, I'm researching it and I wish I had the budget to buy it all just so I could, you know, check it out. So I'm a huge believer in technology, but I also, again, want to make sure that the people that I work with understand it's only a part of the equation and they're looking at other things. I also feel that, you know, you can't replace a great coach who has video working one-to-one. And while I do believe that the technology has allowed us to be much better remote training, I still also feel that the technology is a piece to becoming the best that you can be, and not necessarily the solution for every hitter. So, you know, finding that balance, if you will. Can you go to the next slide? So that brings us to, you know, really what I wanted to you know, get out there today, and that is for a hitter that maybe doesn't understand the feels of creating good playing scores. I want to go through a progression that you can use that I really feel will help. You know, it's helped with 100% of kids that I've worked with, but I feel like it can help just about anybody in understanding how to create good playing scores and why that might be important. So one of the things that I always explain to my hitters early on is trying to make sure that you understand what blast is measuring in plane is different than getting on plane. And because, you know, before blast was using this terminology, which is, you know, everywhere now, getting on plane was more about matching your plane with the pitch, the incoming pitch. Whereas what blast is really measuring is the efficiency of your swing arc, as opposed to, because we don't know what the pitch is when you swing on blast. Now, obviously, if you're looking at plane scores and different pitches, it can show you how efficient you're being, but because your plane score is great doesn't necessarily mean you're getting on plane with the pitch. So I think that's an important thing to understand. And I know that I've seen this before, but I like to use this a lot as the fidget spinner as the barrel on an efficient plane or a swing arc, and then the pencil being the spine or the tilt of the body. And understanding that I could be straight up and down and my plane score might be 80. That doesn't necessarily mean I have good adjustability to hit a certain pitch. So I have to understand that I have to be able to tilt my body and maintain that really efficient swing arc so that I can reach different kinds of pitches or different kinds of balls. So I think that's important as you're starting to work on building your plane score, that you understand that just having a high plane score is not enough. You have to put it into context with the other things, connection, attack angles, and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and real quick, here's a couple of constraints I have that I'm going to set up for this drill. The constraints are I'm going to take the legs out. A lot of times I like to take the legs out first to eliminate too much lower half movement. The next constraint we're going to put on this hitter is we're going to have her lay her barrel across her shoulder to create a pivot point so that she doesn't have too much variability in how she lets the barrel move according to her hands. So if it's on there's a pivot point, now if I move my hands, it's going to change the angle of the barrel. So we're going to leave that on the shoulder. And basically, and this is where really I think the strength of this presentation comes in. You could do this with a 10-year-old hitter today, and I can almost guarantee it will work. So what we're going to have them focus on is, if you'll look at this picture on the bottom left, is we're going to pick 3 different areas in which their barrel, or what I call the laser pointer being an imaginary laser coming out of the knob. We're going to take that laser pointer and we're going to take the legs out of the swing, put them in a good athletic position, and we're going to point that laser at the umpire's chest, obviously an imaginary umpire. And then we're going to have the hitter, we'll get to that on the video, but we're going to have the hitter swing out of that. And if that doesn't work well, then we're going to take that same pivot point, but we're going to say, okay, let's point the laser to the catcher's mask. And what that's doing, it's going to change the plane of the barrel, and every hitter moves differently. So this may work better for some hitters more than others, right? And then if that doesn't work, then we're going to have them point the laser to the catcher's glove. And each one of these creates a different barrel angle that will affect their playing score, right? Let's go ahead and go to the next video or the next slide. So what I'm going to do here, this is actually my 14-year-old daughter in her garage. I told her, I want you to take a very bat tip swing here so that her playing score can be kind of whacked. So if you look right there, her playing score is going to be 35, and that's just because she had a ton of barrel tip. And for her, she tended to get a little bit steep. So the first constraint I asked her to use here was pointed at the umpire's chest and swing out of that with no stride. Now you notice that her playing score jumped to 75 on that swing. So that's probably a good place for her to start feeling where her barrel should flatten out before she fires. But for the sake of this video and this presentation, I want her to be able to repeat it 3 times, because I think when you're working and you're trying to get some changes, you know, it needs to be repeatable. You don't want to just have one because it could be a fluke measurement. So she's going to get a repeat score of 60 or above, which is what we're trying to do to go green, you know, 3 times in a row. And again, this is her picking which angle she's going to use. So she was able to repeat that. So now, you know, depending on the hitter you might be working with, that may not have worked for them. So this next one, she's going to set up and she's going to point the knob down. You'll see it's a little bit more steep of a start. And this is going to change her playing score. Now for her, because the way her body moves, it's not necessarily going to affect it in a negative way, but depending on the hitter, it could change. And then I'm going to have her go ahead, just for the sake of showing this presentation, start it at the catcher's glove. So each time the barrel has a little bit more swing arc, or a little bit more, it's a little bit steep, right? And so I think, can you pause it right there for a second, Donovan? So I think, so what we really did there is we added constraints that would manipulate the playing score. And what you're trying to do here, if you're working with this on an athlete, is you're trying to find the sweet spot for them. You're trying to find the sweet spot that creates the most repeatable, highest playing score from this constraint. And once you have found the sweet spot, then you have to start removing constraints. Because when I talked earlier about literal hitters, I don't necessarily want her to get up in a game and swing with no stride and the barrel on her shoulder. So we have to take this and progress it into her swing. So the first constraint that I'm going to have her take out, and you can experiment with the order because we only have 2. We have the barrel on the shoulder, and then we have the feet taking the stride out. So I think I'm going to have her take out, you can roll the video again. I'm going to tell her to go ahead and let her barrel come up off her shoulder, comfortable for her, right? So now the barrel is up, it's not necessarily on that, and we're going to see if she can repeat the playing score or at least keep it above 60. So she got it above 58, which was close enough. If I was working with her, I'd be like, that's fine. But actually, she's the one that said, no, I want to get above 60. We're doing this video. So she's actually going to try to feel a little bit different in where she points her laser here. And she actually ends up making a great adjustment. So you can see that it goes up. So now we need to remove another constraint. So I believe now I'm going to have her just work a slow stride. So now I'm going to allow her to take a stride, but she's still focusing on where her laser is as she's working through and creating her stretch, trying to repeat, you know, these green scores. And then eventually, you know, and of course this would be a process that'd be a lot longer than just shooting through this. I would say, hey, no constraint, you go ahead and just do your swing and let's make sure we can keep this above 60. Can you pause? Oh, and there's another one where she wasn't happy with it. She's like, okay, I'm going to make my own adjustment here. So this is her thinking through this. I'm not giving her any coaching. She's thinking through, what do I need to do with my laser, or how do I want to get my hand started to where I can clean this plane up a little bit. So let's go ahead and pause it there. So again, can we, yeah. So again, what the process is we just took plane score. I have a whole nother set of these for connection, right? Rotation's a whole different beast. Connection's already a little bit more difficult than the plane, but rotational acceleration is a completely different beast because it has so much to do with body type and core strength and all these other things. But I have another set that I do for connection. And when we talk about the process and the progressions, you know, essentially what we did is we figured out what it felt like to raise the plane score, and then with constraints, and then we remove constraints so we could get back to a normal swing. And some of the other progressions that we don't have time to really talk about, but where this would go from here, if I'm working on plane, is I would want to get some toss action, right? And I would want to have them making these same adjustments off front toss, because they're going to have a little bit more adjustability, and then still keep working through these ideas to keep it above 60. And then we might go to velocity off a machine, so we can put the ball maybe in the same place, but with velocity, because I'm sure, as Lincoln would agree, velocity changes everything, right? So, so the next progression might be trying to do these off of velocity. And then kind of the last piece, and I'm really, you know, going through this super fast. Can you go to that last slide? So this is actually something I wasn't going to include, but it popped up for some crazy reason on my Facebook memories this morning, which is me working with somebody on plane. And this is several years ago, so this is before blast and all that. But this was something that I was working on, which really relates to what we're talking about today. So you can notice she starts off with a fair amount of barrel tip to begin with. And if you'll just keep playing that. So this is how this would kind of apply to somebody who has a different style, who has a more barrel tip early on rather than kind of sets the barrel flat to begin with. And in this particular drill, I'm having the athlete feel the flattening before the turn so that they can create that high plane score. If she had a blast sensor on, I can almost assure you that her plane score would be good, because she's flattening the barrel, and that's what's represented by the green is where she fires. So it starts off at the red, but then when she fires, it's at the green, and then that's how she got on plane. So that's kind of the last piece. We took all the way from really constraining it to getting to a point where it's somebody's normal swing and trying to, you know, basically create green scores in plane.
That's incredible. I hope everyone was taking notes. I hope everyone was screen recording. We are saving these clips, so we will send it out so everyone can be able to go back and see how Lincoln was able to put the numbers to the visual, and then to see those incredible drills that JB just put up. I think we're going to have to create some of those, JB, with you, and then get them blasted, because that is awesome. I know we're like a minute left on time.